We begin today with the political storm on Parliament Hill, where the leader of the opposition is clashing with the Speaker of the House of Commons. The CBC's Karina has been following the story for us, and she's here in Ottawa. So, Karina, okay, let's start with what's happening between Pierre Poilievre and Speaker Greg Fergus. Poilievre was asked to withdraw comments he made in question period yesterday. He didn't show up today to do that, and now we've got a Conservative Party fundraising email that's calling for the Speaker's resignation. What's the latest? Absolutely.
So as you heard in that clip earlier that you played, Pierre Poilievre yesterday accusing Mélanie Joly of pandering to Hamas supporters because he accuses her of not condemning chants and anti-Semitism at protests, something, of course, she says is blatantly untrue. But she wanted that comment withdrawn. The Speaker said he needed to withdraw it. And then the Speaker said today, if you don't withdraw it, I won't recognize you for the day. And so Pierre Poilievre didn't show up for question period. And now the Conservatives are saying that the Speaker is silencing the leader of the opposition and sending out fundraising emails about that and arguing that, you know, the Speaker is a Liberal and therefore this is bias, when, of course, speakers would say that they make their rulings not as part of a party, that in fact they don't sit as part of a party, they don't sit as part of the caucus. But it has gotten to the point where it doesn't matter what Fergus says. The government will, the opposition will continue to accuse whatever he says, if it's not in their favor, as bias. And that's what happened today, and that's the letter that went out to supporters to fundraise off of.
Right. Okay. So rather than comply and withdraw, because if you just showed in the B-roll there, Pierre Poilievre was in Ottawa. He was right outside the doors. He just didn't go to question period today and gave up the questions. We'll see what he does tomorrow. But this was all sparked, as you said, Karina, by allegations that Poilievre made about Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly. And she also went to that microphone today to give her rebuttal. Walk us through that.
Yes, she did. She's beyond the, of course, I condemn anti-Semitism that she continues to say. She actually called Pierre Poilievre a hypocrite and said that he seems to pick and choose which groups to condemn for anti-Semitism and, in fact, which groups to cozy up to, is how she phrased it. Have a listen to what she had to say.
Clearly, Poilievre is doing one thing and saying one thing, and he's doing another. I'll give you 3 examples. First, while he's saying that he's fighting anti-Semitism, he never condemned those who were waving a Nazi flag during the Freedom Convoy on this Parliament Hill. Why didn't he? Second, he cozies up to groups like Diagolon, who spread neo-fascist ideology across this country. Why does he denounce their anti-Semitism as well? And also, when his caucus met with far-right politicians from Germany that were downplaying Hitler's crimes, he kept them in his caucus, and they're still sitting next to him in the House of Commons.
Okay, so Karina, that sets the stage for what will probably be a difficult Wednesday. But while the focus today is on Pierre Poilievre, there's another MP affected by a Speaker's ruling, sort of caught up in this, and he's been banned from speaking for much longer than this one day for Poilievre.
Yeah, 7 months. That's how long Yvan Baker has been denied the right to speak in the House of Commons and speak on behalf of his constituents or anyone. He's a strong supporter of Ukraine. In March 20th, he made a speech where he accused the Conservatives of trying to earn votes from the far right by having what he called a Putin wing of the Conservative Party and saying that wing that supports Russian President Vladimir Putin has taken over the party. Well, the Conservatives complained about this, and at the time it was the Deputy Speaker, Chris Entremont, who agreed that that was unparliamentary and ruled that unless Baker apologized and retracted, he would not be recognized. And until he did that, he would not be recognized. And so he has not retracted, hasn't apologized, said he still believes what he said. And so it wasn't until this situation arose that then the Speaker, Greg Fergus, said, oh, okay, well, now Yvan Baker can go forward and speak and be recognized starting tomorrow. And when asked about why suddenly the turnaround, there was not really a clear answer from the Speaker's office other than, well, he did this for Pierre Poilievre and therefore now Yvan Baker. But I guess you just look at the specter of the Speaker facing the idea of if they had said to Pierre Poilievre, you will not be recognized until you retract and apologize. I think most people think it's pretty likely that Pierre Poilievre would not have done that. And then you've got the specter of the leader of the opposition not being allowed to speak for forever long. And so maybe it was just easier at this point to pull back on the punishment that had been given to Yvan Baker.
Yeah, we're going to speak to Yvan Baker in about an hour from now on the show, but it's interesting. One-day punishment for the leader of the opposition, a half-a-year punishment for the member from Etobicoke Centre. All right, Karina, thanks for walking us through it all. That's the CBC's Karina Roman in Ottawa.
The leader of the opposition should withdraw his comments made yesterday during question period. If he is not willing to do so, the chair will not recognize him for the remainder of today's sitting.
Those comments that Poilievre made yesterday were accusing the Minister of Foreign Affairs of pandering to Hamas.
She continues to pander to Hamas supporters in the Liberal Party as part of her leadership campaign rather than doing her job. So I'll give her another chance. Will she publicly support Israel's right to retaliate against the tyrants of Tehran and the terrorists in Hezbollah and Hamas to protect itself? Yes or no?
Yeah. So that was just a prelude to comments that Poilievre made last night at an October 7th commemoration, where he accused the Trudeau government of fueling anti-Semitism in Canada.
Why all of a sudden has this hatred found such a home here in Canada? Now, some say it's because our people are flawed. The government needs to fix the people, censor the people, better control and corral the people. Well, is it really the people who are the problem?
Poilievre repeated some of those claims he made last night just outside the House of Commons this afternoon, where Mélanie Joly, the Foreign Affairs Minister, also appeared to give her rebuttal.
Clearly, Poilievre is doing one thing and saying one thing, and he's doing another. I'll give you 3 examples. First, while he's saying that he's fighting anti-Semitism, he never condemned those who were waving a Nazi flag during the Freedom Convoy on this Parliament Hill. Why didn't he? Second, he cozies up to groups like Diagolon, who spread neo-fascist ideology across this country. Why does he denounce their anti-Semitism as well? And also, when his caucus met with far-right politicians from Germany that were downplaying Hitler's crimes, he kept them in his caucus, and they're still sitting next to him in the House of Commons.
Okay, there's a lot there for the Tuesday Power Panel. We're going to get to them now. Michelle Cadario is a former Liberal National Campaign Director. Kate Harrison is a Conservative political analyst. Françoise Boivin is a former NDP MP. And Sherelle Evelyn is the managing editor for The Hill Times. It's good to see you all. One more item to add to that litany of events. We have an email from the Conservative Party calling for Greg Fergus to be fired for his ruling against Pierre Poilievre today. So that is another escalation potentially there. Michelle, why don't you get us started? What do you make of what we've seen here in Ottawa over the last 24 hours?
Well, they're all playing games, I've got to say. And it's a shame that they're using this kind of an issue as the backset for kind of what's going on. But what I really see is, Mr. Poilievre is pushing the limits. He has kind of decided that the conventional norms of behavior, of attitude, of language don't apply to him. And he's now just pushing and pushing to see how far he can go. And, the Liberals kind of bit. And I'm not saying that they didn't do the right thing in terms of the type of behavior that's acceptable and that's not in terms of Greg Fergus and the Speaker. But that's kind of almost playing into what he wanted, I think. And, now calling for Greg Fergus to resign and trying to make this some kind of a a stand of privilege, a stand of freedom, of being able to speak your rights, it's like he's looking for a fight in every single corner, and not in any way looking to make Parliament work. But it's kind of working for him, and so I guess why would he stop? Because there's nothing to point to, whether it's the polls or anything else, that seems to be keeping him in check. And as long as he's not, I think he's just going to continue this behavior.
Kate, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, is it right for the party to be going after the speaker, demanding he be fired for asking the leader to withdraw one comment when we've had a Liberal MP who hasn't been able to speak for 7 months for saying something similar?
Just to Michelle's point on the function of Parliament and getting Parliament to work better, the government has a very easy solution to that, which is to release the documents that are part of the SDTC inquiry. We're now on day 7 of the government not handing those documents over, and there is zero action in Parliament as a result of the government not handing that over. So we have to mention that if we're going to talk about a dysfunctional Parliament. On the Greg Fergus piece, there's a couple of issues here. If you go back to the substance of what Pierre Poilievre was seeking for Minister Joly to condemn, it was very straightforward. These are chants in the streets about Israel soon being gone. We have riots happening where you've got groups burning the Canadian flag, saying death to Canada. He was seeking, in my view, a simple condemnation of such activity, and he didn't get it yesterday. It was an opportunity for Minister Joly to give a full-throated defense of Israel. She didn't take that opportunity. She didn't condemn those remarks. So I think it's understandable that the Conservatives would be frustrated with that. On the Fergus piece, not a first-time offender. This is another instance of Greg Fergus weighing in a partisan manner that calls into question whether or not he has the neutrality to hold this important function. He was sending out events for Liberal parties. He, of course, had that issue last year where he was adorned in speaker attire doing a video for an Ontario Liberal parliamentarian. All of this combined together would bring up whether or not Greg Fergus does have the neutrality to maintain his position and make some of these rulings in a neutral way.
But Kate, on that point, Yvan Baker, who we're going to talk to in a little bit on the show, the Liberal MP for Etobicoke Centre, when he referred to the Conservatives as having a Putin wing of the party, Chris D'Entremont, a Conservative deputy speaker, ruled that unparliamentary, and Yvan Baker hasn't been allowed to speak in Parliament ever since. So is this not the same thing? I mean, if Greg Fergus needs to go for this, does Chris D'Entremont need to go for that?
Rather than get into kind of a comparison between the two, I think you kind of need to look at, whether or not, the speaker is actually in a position to make such a ruling in a neutral way. I'd point out, David, that Fergus did ask Prime Minister Trudeau to retract a comment that he had made about Conservatives being homophobic. Trudeau did not retract that comment. There were no consequences for Justin Trudeau. So again, when we're looking at Fergus specifically, he has not ruled against the Liberals, but he has ruled against the Conservatives. Right.
Françoise, how do you view this? And in particular, the politicization of anti-Semitism and the conflict happening in the Middle East right now?
Well, let me tell you, I'm totally depressed by what I'm hearing right now. Having sat in the House of Commons, if there's one thing, debates can be muscle. They can be pretty hard, and you have to be, I always said it was extreme sport, and ça fait pas dans la dentelle. You have to be strong to be in the House of Commons and participate in some of the debates. But there's a difference between asking the tough questions and implying bad faith, implying that somebody is supporting a terrorist group. I mean, it's not nothing. So that's where the person passed the boundary. So that's one point. How did I feel when I heard that yesterday? I'm like, here they go again. It's the 7th of October. All the time should have been put on the victims. It was Israel moment at that point in time. And it becomes what? A big fight, a street fight between the Conservative leader who aspired to become prime minister and the minister of foreign affairs, implying that she was supporting terrorists because she aims at becoming the leader of the Liberal Party. I mean, it was so wrong in so many aspects. So anybody who's a decent human being would just get up and say, you know what? It was a slip of the tongue. Messages passed. You know what you do as a lawyer in front of a jury and you're admonished by the judge and you say, I removed the comments, but everybody heard them anyway. So you made the point. And no, it continues and continues. And Mélanie Joly comes out today to explain to us how the Conservatives got absolutely zero lesson to give to anybody with the people, with the Nazi flag and so on. We're escalating exactly the things we're asking Israel not to do. I mean, we're doing in Parliament. This is discouraging. If somebody has a right to fire or ask for the speaker to step down, it's Yvan Baker. Because me, having 7 months not to be able to speak, to be recognized in my seat, and Pierre Poilievre for saying somebody is supporting terrorists, getting 1 day, I mean, I would just say, what the hell is this house becoming?
Well, and he didn't withdraw. He didn't go. He goes tomorrow. He doesn't have to withdraw tomorrow. So it's business as usual for him. And Yvan Baker magically has had his ban lifted, so he'll be allowed to speak in Parliament tomorrow. Sherelle, what do you make of how this has all played out in the last 2 days?
Well, I think as Francois put it very well, it's discouraging to have to watch this type of behavior play out over and over and over again. From the time that Greg Fergus was elected as Speaker, he took the chair, you know, it's been kind of disrespect after disrespect. Yes, he has made mistakes. No one's going to dispute that. And that has merely fueled the kind of Conservatives' fire when they want to accuse him of being partisan. But he has, I think, given a lot of leeway and special treatment to Poilievre in particular. Yes, this is, him getting, punished, sanctioned, whatever you want to call it, for not withdrawing a remark. But like you said, contrast that to MP Baker, who had to go a whole 7 months without being able to speak. And Poilievre gets to miss class for a day and then come back tomorrow as though nothing happened. So yeah, that is discouraging to watch this play out, especially against the backdrop of something that is so serious, and that's people's lives, and that's that's anti-Semitism that is, running rampant across the country. It's Islamophobia. It's, racism in all corners, really. And I don't know if saying that, okay, we're going to police everybody's speech and we're going to crack down and, change of government, that's going to fix things. Not necessarily, but what will be a good start is if the people who are supposed to be the leaders can comport themselves in such a way that makes everybody else want to follow them.
Michelle, when Mélanie Joly rebutted it today, I mean, she talked about, the swastika flag we saw during the start of the convoy protest on Parliament Hill and Diagolon, which are I don't know if they directly apply to Mr. Poilievre in any way, but the third point she hit on, this meeting that Dean Ellis and Colin Carey and Leslie Lewis have with Christine Anderson, who is a member of the European Parliament, member for the Alternative for Germany, which is on an extremist watch list in Germany as a threat to Germany because it has pushed anti-Muslim ideology, downplayed Hitler. And I know they met with her because of their disagreement with vaccines, but there's no consequences there. I mean, it's an interesting thing to have dragged up when you're accusing other people of being anti-Semitic, that members of your caucus met with a group described by some as neo-Nazis and they didn't pay any price.
No, you're right. Listen, Minister Joly brought up some points that do fly in the face of what Mr. Poilievre was standing for. And it does become a bit of a tit for tat as serious as these issues are. I can see what Francois is pointing to in terms of a little bit of an escalation. And I'm biting my tongue trying to not, go back at Kate in terms of some of the things that Scheer did that in terms of the same things that Greg Fergus was admonished for. But it's kind of part of this season right now, unfortunately, and I don't see it not escalating even further. I don't think that these issues are being taken seriously. And I go back again, Francoise was 100% right. On October 7th of all days, to not at least, try and be united in terms of where Canada stands, and recognizing just the devastation that's going on in the Mideast, that started with that horrific day. It's I hate to say it's a sign of the times. I hate to say that this is just, everything's become strategic and is seen through a campaign and political lens, but I just don't see it stopping. And from either party, from any party, as we kind of get further into the election season.
Kate, is that what it is? I mean, certainly it was pressed this way in question here, but even at the memorial service last night, Mr. Poilievre called for a change in government while speaking at an October 7th memorial service alongside the Prime Minister. Is that just the campaign, or is that a step too far?
Part of the reason we're having this discussion is because there were some very disturbing incidents that happened just over the weekend across the country that are not even necessarily pro-Palestinian. They are anti-Israel, they are anti-Canada, and they are playing to terrorist sympathies. I think what Poilievre is talking about is the breakdown in our society that we see happening, that we've seen increase and escalate since October 7th. And he is giving a voice to the frustration of the Jewish community and of a lot of Canadians who are wondering what on earth is happening in their communities. There has been a prolific rise in anti-Semitism since October 7th. People are frustrated. And I think that part of that does come back to governments and law enforcement being very complacent about what is happening in their communities. And as long as that complacency exists, as long as that convoluted take on the part of the Liberal government exists and their position on what's happening in the Mideast, I think that it is right for politicians to point out how dangerous society is becoming for vulnerable groups like Jews in Canada.
Francoise?
Well, all I would answer to that is I agree with what you're saying, Kate, but the problem is Pierre Poilievre, and even in your comment, you're forgetting to say that the government has asked the proper authorities, and I'm not there to defend that government. I'm not a big fan of it, but they are doing it the proper way. You have to have a specific inquiry to remove certain status to these groups. You just can't go into a ceremony and say they are out. It doesn't work that way. We're not a banana republic. We have a rule of laws. We have ways to do things. So instead of asking, the proper way would be to say, has the government done something? The minister gets up and says, yes, by the way, we did. Not you're crap because you haven't done nothing. You're participating in saying, burning our flags and so on and so forth, keeping the impression in the head of Canadians that is what's happening, which is not true. And boy, believe you me, this government's got lots of faults, but not that one.
Okay, Kate, quickly, and then Sherelle.
Francoise, there are things that the government could do that they're not doing. They could declare Semidoun a terrorist entity. That has been a request of the Jewish community for 4 years. That is not something that has transpired overnight. The government has had ample time to declare them a terrorist entity. They took a long time to declare the IRGC a terrorist entity. They only did so on the eve of the Toronto-St. Paul's by-election. Gee, I wonder why. And lastly, they reinstated funding to UNRWA. So these are actions or inactions that the government has made that make it very clear, I think, for the community where they stand on these issues and why they would be so frustrated.
Yeah, and just late this afternoon after question period, in case not everybody heard this, Jennifer O'Connell, who's the Parliamentary Secretary to Dominic LeBlanc, the Minister of Public Safety, did say that the government had referred the issue of Samidoun, the organization at the heart, allegedly, of some of these incidents, to their national security advisors for an examination, a quick review on whether or not it should go through the process of being declared a terrorist entity. So some sort of process movement there. Sherelle, your thoughts on what everyone said?
Well, I think that process piece is really interesting, and that, there were some comments from a Liberal MP, Ben Carr, this afternoon that I thought were kind of prescient. And he's somebody who, who's a Jewish man who has been outspoken about support for Israel, but he spoke to the process of things that need to happen. And he was saying that, just because he thinks that somebody might be, you might think that their actions are wrong, but he's not about to call them terrorists without, going through the proper steps. And someone like, Ben Carr, who, has a certain point of view, and he's willing to be reasonable and rational and say, we all agreed to sign up to follow the rule of law and certain steps and certain procedures. So let's do that. And I think that's a lesson that can be taken by, all MPs in the House who all signed up to be members of Parliament and follow its rules, whether that's what counts as unparliamentary language or what have you. And that breakdown, I think, that we're seeing is really helping to fuel some of what we're seeing outside of the House as well.
Yeah, and Michelle's the final point. The debate has gotten to the point now that anyone who disagrees with you or stands in your way in terms of achieving your goal, they're corrupted, they're incompetent, their character is questionable, they need to be fired. It's gotten to a very deeply personal level over this past year, to the point that it's not about ideas, everything's ad hominem.
It sure has. And who does that remind you of? Donald Trump. He brought out this kind of a way to campaign down south, and he kind of has made it de rigueur, I guess. But certainly, the idea that the norms don't apply, the social standards don't apply, and go after your political opponent as if they're your enemy. He's made that commonplace, and I guess some in Canada have kind of cottoned on to that.
All right, Kate, I'm going to give you the last word. We're out of time. But close it off for us.
Yeah, I come back to Minister Joly's decision yesterday to kind of refuse to condemn what should have been a very simple condemnation of a very dangerous chant that was happening in the streets. I don't know that we would be having this conversation around semantics had she just taken the opportunity to take a morally clear position on those chants. Instead, we're talking about parliamentary process and not actually looking at solutions that would better support the Jewish community.
Well, I don't know if it's just parliamentary process. And I think, part of what the minister said yesterday was like, why are we doing this today? It wasn't, I'm refusing to condemn it. It's like, why are we having this sort of a political argument today? But she was asked again today, and she did condemn it today in her scrum of question period. So take that for what it's worth, just to put that context out there for people. But thank you all for being here. Thanks to the Power Panel, Michelle Cadario, Sherelle Evelyn, Françoise Boivin, and Kate Harrison. Liberal MP Yvan Baker was elected to be the voice of Etobicoke Centre in the House of Commons, but since March of this year, that voice has been silenced due to a ruling from the Deputy Speaker, Chris d'Entremont. At issue was d'Entremont's ruling that these comments by Baker were unparliamentary.
There's a Putin wing in the Conservative Party, and the leader of the Conservative Party is seeking to earn their support. The Putin wing has taken over the Conservative Party.
The punishment for those comments was that Baker wouldn't be recognized to speak in the House unless he retracted or apologized. But that was all retracted today after Speaker Greg Fergus only handed down a one-day speaking ban to Pierre Poilievre for comments that seemed to break the same rules. Liberal MP Yvan Baker joins me now from the House of Commons foyer. Mr. Baker, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining me today.
Good to see you, David. Thanks for having me.
We have seen the ruling that the ban on you speaking has been lifted, but no real explanation beyond it seems to mirror what happened today with Mr. Poilievre. Have you been given a fuller explanation as to why you get to speak now without retraction or apology?
I have not received a fuller explanation, David. I mean, look, I feel vindicated that I'm going to be allowed to speak starting tomorrow and that I don't have to apologize or retract what I said. But I am really disappointed with the ruling because there's a huge double standard here. Pierre Poilievre was punished for something that I think is far more serious than what I did, with a one-day punishment. For one day, he wasn't allowed to speak in the House. I had to sit out for 6 months, or over 6 months. And I think this double standard is something that really, really is disappointing. I think it's emblematic of a broader double standard that's happening in the House with Pierre Poilievre. We regularly hear Pierre Poilievre breaking the rules of the House, insulting other members, saying we're allying with dictators. I mean, he's even accused our Prime Minister of collaborating with Vladimir Putin to kill Ukrainians. And in most of those cases, he faces no punishment at all. This is one of those rare cases where Pierre Poilievre actually has faced some sort of sanction. Even when he did get a sanction today, it was only for one day, while I had to sit out for 6 months. And I think that that's unfair. There's only one class of MPs. Right. There should be only one class. There shouldn't be this double standard.
Okay, so you say it's a double standard, so I should forward you the email from the Conservative Party asking people to sign up and have Greg Fergus be fired? Because do you agree with that sentiment? If you think it's not being run properly and that you were unfairly treated while the Conservatives are allowed by a parliament presided over by a Liberal to do these things that you're taking such objection to?
Well, look, I mean, we have to remember that in my case, I was sanctioned by the Conservative Deputy Speaker, by Chris d'Entremont. And Chris d'Entremont, he was the one who imposed the punishment. And he was the one who actually came to me after the debate. I went and spoke with him, and he admitted that the ruling was wrong, that the only reason he made the ruling was because he felt pressured by his Conservative colleagues to make the ruling and to silence me. So effectively, the Conservative Deputy Speaker silenced me because Conservative MPs didn't like what I had to say. Like, that's censorship, and I think that's dangerous for our democratic system. So I think it's not fair to just point at Greg Fergus. I think you have to look at the initial ruling, and the initial ruling was made by the Conservative Deputy Speaker at the behest of his Conservative colleagues.
Do you have any evidence of that conversation you just referenced with Mr. d'Entremont, that he would have said to you that he only did it because of peer pressure? Because that is a pretty significant allegation you're making there.
I stand by those comments. I stand by those comments.
So where did this happen?
This happened in the House. Immediately after the debate on March 20th, I went up and spoke with him, and that's what he said to me. Okay,
I know you say this was Chris d'Entremont who did this, but it was in compliance with a ruling from Greg Fergus, right, in November of last year, saying that comments linking parliamentarians to dictatorships or terrorist organizations will be ruled unparliamentary. And I know, Ukrainian heritage and stand by Ukraine, so you're not going to apologize for criticizing Vladimir Putin, but you did link them, saying there was a Putin wing to the party. So that was clearly in violation of what the Speaker had ruled in November, was it not?
I actually don't think it was in violation of what the Speaker had ruled in November. When the Speaker had ruled in November, he ruled because someone had done what Pierre Poilievre did just yesterday, which is link a member of Parliament to a terrorist organization, in this case Hamas. In my case, what I said was that there is a wing of the Conservative Party that is pro-Putin, that believes pro-Russian propaganda, that doesn't support for Ukraine, and that as a result, that's why Conservative MPs have unanimously voted against support for Ukraine over the past year, voting against military aid, voting multiple times against the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. And Mr. Poilievre showed tremendous disrespect to President Zelensky when he was here in the House. And David, this isn't just those things that demonstrate that. I've been told this by Conservatives, that there's a far-right MAGA movement in the party that is pro-Putin. So I was speaking the truth. It's based in evidence. And frankly, it didn't break the rules of the House because I wasn't speaking about an individual MP or multiple MPs. I was speaking about a wing of a party. In the case of what Pierre Poilievre did yesterday with Minister Joly, that was quite different. He alleged that she was looking to earn the support of people that support a terrorist organization. That is completely different. And that's why I believe that what Pierre Poilievre did was far more serious. And yet, he received only a one-day punishment, where what I did was not a contravention of the rules, and I had to sit out for over 6 months.
Okay, so I know your frustration is with Chris d'Entremont for what happened to you, but ultimately Greg Fergus is the Speaker of the House of Commons. And, whatever decision he makes on disciplining Pierre Poilievre for what happened yesterday, there is precedent he has to take into account, which clearly would include the punishment meted out to you. If there is this application of a double standard, as you say, isn't the Speaker of the House of Commons the problem here? Because it's his job. He gets the big salary and all of the perks that go with it to be consistent in the application of the rules, and you're here saying it's not happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and as I already said, I think I'm disappointed with the ruling that Greg Fergus made about Pierre Poilievre today, because I do think it's a double standard. I think Pierre Poilievre should have faced at least the same punishment that I did, which would be that he would not be allowed to speak in the House until he apologized. And as in my case, that went on for over 6 months. If that went on for 6 months for Pierre Poilievre, so be it. But the penalty should have been at least similar. And I agree with you, that was Greg Fergus's ruling, and I'm disappointed with his ruling.
Do you think they just kind of took an easy out here to lift both penalties rather than avoid? I mean, Pierre Poilievre did not come in today to question period. He was right outside the House of Commons. He could have gone in there, but he chose not to. Presumably, so he didn't have to comply with this ruling. He will not have to comply with it tomorrow. It seems had Speaker Fergus meted out the same ruling on Mr. Poilievre that you got, that the collision course would be set for the Speaker and the Leader of the Opposition. Do you think he was just trying to avoid that?
I mean, it's difficult to know what the Speaker was thinking when he made the ruling. I guess what is very clear is that if it hadn't been for the fact that the ruling had been imposed on me by Chris d'Entremont, and if it hadn't been for the fact that I didn't apologize, in other words, I was still sitting on the sidelines, I think there's a good chance that the ruling, Pierre Poilievre might have gotten off with very little, if any, punishment at all, as he has in the past. But you'd have to ask the Speaker about that, David.
Well, I just wonder, what do you think? Do you still have confidence in Greg Fergus as the Speaker? Because, Parliament is, the privilege motion is one thing. That's a parliamentary tactic that can be used on an issue where the government is found to have breached the privilege of members. But you've been sitting there silently for 6 months. You see what's happening in question period every day. I mean, do you have confidence in the Speaker's ability to control the House of Commons right now?
I think that the double standards have to end. I think the Speaker, the Deputy Speaker, have to work to make sure that happens. And I think Pierre Poilievre and the leaders of each political party, especially Pierre Poilievre in this case, needs to take it upon himself to behave in a respectful and parliamentary way and abide by the rules. And when he gets punished for breaking the rules, he shouldn't be going out there sending fundraising emails and calling for the firing of the Speaker. I think we should all question in this moment why Pierre Poilievre is doing that. I think the question here is how can Pierre Poilievre, someone who speaks this way in the House, someone who breaks the rules all the time, someone who can't accept a ruling against him that clearly should have been a punishment against him that clearly should have been imposed, how this man can ever become Prime Minister? I think that's the question that people should be asking.
Well, I mean, it's a question they will get asked in the election, but I just wonder what your vision you just spelled out for how you think the House should function. Are you optimistic we're going to get there, just as the last 20 seconds?
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that moments like this, David, give everyone an opportunity to learn, whether that's the Speaker or the Deputy Speaker or Pierre Poilievre. But the rules have to be applied evenly, and right now, that's not the case. Okay, we'll see what happens right around 2 o'clock tomorrow. Liberal MP Yvan Baker, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, David.